Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Thor Conklin, and today it's actually Memorial Day, and I love this. This is what entrepreneurs do, right? It's Monday, it's Memorial Day, and I'm like, Karen, do you want to do it a little earlier in the day because, maybe you've got a barbecue to go to or something, and she's like, heck no, I've got a busy schedule. I don't have any other time other than what we booked. So I absolutely appreciate that. Karen Briscoe is with us today. She has learned to flip time to focus on meaningful activities and work. If she can do it, you can too. Her most recent book, Flip Time, Love Life, is based on the heroine's journey, 80 by 80 movement, milestones and medals. Karen challenges for life. Karen is also the founder of the 80 by 80 movement, which she started at age 59. 59? Come on, you're not 59.
I'm actually 60. Right. So thank you.
It is never too late. I'm 55.
Never too late.
Exactly. I'm 55, and I feel like I'm just getting started. Besides you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a coach. You have an amazing real estate brokerage firm that you own. Did a $1.5 billion in revenue since the inception. You run a podcast, 5 Minute Success Podcast, the books, Flip Time, Love Life, Real Estate Success in 5 minutes a day. I love that. It's all about execution and how do we get it done quicker. Commit to Leads 66-Day Challenge. There was another 3 pages of accolades on this woman. You want to stay tuned. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of value today. So welcome to the show, Karen.
Well, thank you for having me. And I was delighted to have you on the 5 Minute Success Podcast. And so this is really a lot of fun when we can reciprocate and I can be a part of your community too.
Well, thank you. Welcome. And I want to point out here because I can see what's coming already. And that is if you're not in the real estate industry, the things we're going to talk about today are going to be cross-contextual to any industry that you have. I mean, look, I love that concept, 5 minutes. How did you come up with the 5-minute concept?
Well, I found that a lot of people that I was coaching and training, they said they didn't have enough time for their business or personal development. Believe it or not. And a lot of sales and entrepreneurs, they succumb to that shiny object syndrome, right? They're attracted to the next thing, the squirrel. And so what would happen is they would get a book or they would get a program and they get started on it and they didn't finish it. And I was like, okay, well, do you have 5 minutes a day? And everybody said they did. And I'm like, okay, invest 5 minutes a day. And it turns out it actually has more impact than you would think, because by doing something every day and building that muscle memory, that habit, you're more likely to remember it, you're more likely to put it in practice, and you're more likely to be able to recall it when you need it, because there's a lot of, not just real estate, but there's a lot of books on that are a lot of information, like textbook-like, and you can, really kind of boring. People often don't remember it. And then there's inspiration, and that is motivational, and yet at the same time, not enough substance for actually putting into practice. So the idea is combining the two with memorable, sticky stories is what I call them. People are more likely to be able to put them in practice. So that's how the 5 Minute Success came about. And every day is designed to be different. It's a daily reader. And even though that every day is different, there is some core principles. And that is we actually use them in the 5 Minute Success Podcast, because what I found is these principles apply almost universally across sales, entrepreneurship, really almost every profession and business. And so that's how the 5 Minute Success Podcast came about.
I love it. It's all about habits,
Yes.
If you can develop the habits, and we talk about, a lot of those rituals turn into habits, and those habits start to turn into life-changing building blocks, because it doesn't take a lot, but the consistency is what really, really matters. We were talking before we went on air here, and we're coming up on our 625th episode. You have a couple hundred podcasts. Most people will come out, I want to do a podcast. They do 6 or 7 episodes, and all of a sudden they're gone. And that's what so many entrepreneurs do, is they rush into this idea, they start doing something, and then it just peters out. And it's the consistency day in and day out. And it doesn't matter if you're spending 5 minutes or a couple hours, just continue to do it.
Well, there is a lot of research about the limiting and restricting time. It's actually called Parkinson's law, because a lot of people struggle with the idea that they want to do personal and business development again, and yet they say they don't have time. And so limiting and restricting time, they're more likely to put it into practice. And then you get that domino effect or that cumulative effect of doing it every day. And it's fascinating. You talked about this whole podcast phenomenon, because I don't know, thousands are starting every day. They're saying most fade, and they call it pod fade. It actually has a name, but they fade at 7. Research has shown, in a lot of habit formation research, and there's a lot of statistics, but the one that's most commonly cited is the idea of 66 days. So what happens is the first 21 days, the first 3 weeks, everybody is really gung-ho. They're ready to do it, and they're committed. And I say, just talk to anybody who's signed up for Whole30 or got a Peloton, right? I mean, they're evangelists. They're so excited. The next 22 days is where the pod fade comes in, right? The sustaining, the consistent effort, they're starting to evaluate whether they really wanted to do this or not. And that's what, Seth Godin talks about the dip. That's where people go into a dip. And the powering through the dip is really key for habit formation, because the benefits are on the other side, right? So the next 22 days or 3 weeks is where you start to experience the benefits of a good habit. And then you've got the virtuous cycle, you're going, the positive aspects of it. And the truth is, if it's really truly a habit, then the idea is you don't stop. Like you don't stop brushing your teeth, right? In Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he's done a lot of research on habit formation, and that's what he says. He's like, people think, oh, I'm going to get 66 days in. And it's just like you at 660 podcasts, right? I mean, the idea is you set the systems in place, you set the practices in place, but it's to build habits that you've chosen that are going to help you achieve what you want to achieve, right? Isn't that the point?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about execution. Our entire brand is about execution.
Yes.
Knowledge is not power. It's power, or knowledge that is actually executed is powerful. And so for me, it's impossible to quit, right? Because if I stop the podcast, what have I just told the entire do it.
Doesn't matter, right?
Right. I quit on things. I can't do that. So I put enough leverage on myself. What are some of the ideas and tactics and strategies that you give your clients in order to take something from a new habit? And I actually I try to get clients into the addiction mode, which of course, nobody likes to talk about addiction. It's a bad word. But could you imagine being addicted to love, addicted to your spouse, addicted to providing
success, right? Achieving at a high level. Right.
Addictions can be good if they're focused in the right direction. So how do we move from it's hard, it's not a habit yet, to the point where it just becomes automatic?
So what I found is that actually what I call activity blocking is more effective for a lot of people. Time blocking gets a lot of attention. The thing about time is it's a created thing. It is a human created construct. And so activities are what you can actually track, and you can see whether you've achieved what you said you're going to achieve. So like, for example, in lead generation for real estate, I have set 5 contacts, touches a day as being the standard of my lead generation efforts. And I've been doing it consistently since 2002. So for 17 years. And the beauty of that is you can track whether you actually did it or not. The challenge with time blocking or using time is that there's back to the squirrel and the shiny object syndrome. I find that people end up doing a lot of things other than the actual lead generation activity. And so the other benefit to the tracking of the activity is then in the case of lead generation where your business is coming from. If it's in the case of exercise, how many miles you ran. If it's in the case of how many podcast episodes you've recorded, where you stand. I mean, it is a very defined thing, and then people can adjust accordingly based on how effective they are in their activities. Obviously, if you walk, you're not going to burn as many calories as or travel as much distance, and if you run at a faster pace. So then you can adjust according to that. But the idea of this tracking activities, and so I track practically everything I do, and I find to be more accountable than, again, the time, because the time seems to people, it passes and they can't show the results.
Yeah. Great concept. I love that. Show me the results. What can I measure? If you can't,
yes,
it's very hard to make adjustments on it. And you're right. You could spend an hour doing prospecting and get 1 or 2 done, or you can get, hey, you've got 20 to do. It's kind of like with the kids, right? You can't go watch TV until you finish your vegetables. And what do they do before that? They just kind of push the vegetables around because they don't want them. As soon as they look, you're not leaving the table till the vegetables are gone. Boom, they're gone.
It's amazing how productive people get. I'm telling you. And I find that to be freeing for several reasons. One, I'm not chained to a certain amount of time. If I am productive, I've done that and I can move on. I can go for a bike ride, or I can take the afternoon off, or I can, pursue another passion. If I'm behind, then you can do what I call backfilling. If you are getting ready to travel, or you have a heavy schedule of other activities, you can front load. So that's another of the benefits of activity blocking, rather than using time as a construct to accomplish what it is that you've set up that you want to accomplish.
You talked a little bit when we first came on about time constraints. I'm assuming that's almost like setting a stopwatch and saying, okay, you're going to spend 5 minutes doing this, and when the alarm goes off, are you done? Did I get that correctly?
So the idea of 5-minute success was to help people realize that they can achieve at a high level without having to spend a lot of time. It doesn't technically, I even think, take 5 minutes. Actually, I think it takes less than 5 minutes, depending on how fast you read. So every day is a story. So the other thing about the idea of time, and this has come to me, is you brought up my 80 by 80 movement and the milestones and medals and challenges for life, but also flip time, because the idea of time being a created thing, and this is actually from Lao Tzu, he said, to say I don't have time is like saying I don't want to. That was said 2,500 years ago. We all think we created busy. This is actually a human condition, that there's not enough time. And so I'm sure you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the whole idea you're supposed to work your way up the pyramid. And that is where you start with your lower level needs and physical needs, and then esteem needs, and once you've reached the pinnacle, if you will, the top of the pyramid, then you can start working on self-actualization. The problem with that is many people, they don't get to the top of the pyramid because they run out of time. And this is where the idea of time, of flipping time, and focusing first on meaningful work. Some people call it flow. Some people, it's their passion. Some people, they call it their zone of genius. The idea is to do that first. And it's counterintuitive in this highly productive world we're in. And yet, at the same time, what I find is that the people who do that make even more of an impact, because they are living at their highest and best self. In real estate, that's how we determine whether real estate is being used at its highest value and this, we can look at the same thing as in our own lives and our own work. And it's really a phenomenon that, sometimes doesn't happen to people until they hit their middle years, and they go, okay, I invested all these years into my career, my profession, and they look around and they go, well, is that it? I'm saying, well, why don't you just start today and do it today? Because, well, first of all, you don't know how much time you have left, right? But also the impact on yourself and the people around you is going to be more positive.
So start that first thing in the morning.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of, again, research associated with this as well. I don't know if you're familiar with Hal Elrod and the Miracle Morning. The idea is that to work on yourself first. The personal and business development spaces and sphere. A lot of people, particularly like in sales and real estate and other professions, they're highly productive. They constantly go into training and becoming more. I'm like, okay, you know what? And I think it's Jim Rohn. You're only going to reach the level of productivity that you personally can sustain, right? And that you're capable of. And so flip it and work on yourself first, because if you are achieving at your highest level, then your business productivity is going to be achieving at the highest level. So yes, most people benefit from a morning routine because you start the day right, and then the rest of the day is more likely to flow from there.
So don't start the first time in the morning with Facebook and Instagram, checking out all your friends and how well.
Yeah, that's probably not the most productive way to start your day. Hal has the Savors acronym that he follows, and I find it to be very, well, first of all, it's easy to remember so that I can remember that I've covered all the Savors. But silence meditation is the S, A is affirmations, V is visualization, E is exercise, R is reading, and S is scribing or journaling. The reading component of it is, again, could be real estate success in 5 minutes a day, or any other, literature, spiritual or motivational, or something that would have a positive impact on your day. I wouldn't necessarily say the news would fit into that criteria.
Never watched the news.
I haven't watched it in years either. Yeah, the world keeps turning.
Really
doesn't really matter.
And there's actually news. Eventually, it'll get to me.
Yeah, if I'm going to need to know. But the thing is, I discovered about that, and I don't know if you had a similar awakening, and that is, I can't change it.
Yeah,
I really can't. Yeah. If I could, I would do something about it, but I can't change it. And so the things that I can change, the things I can have an impact on, those are the ones that are in my, sphere of influence. That's where I want to put my time and attention.
You've been in the real estate game for quite some time. You've seen successful real estate professionals. You've seen unsuccessful real estate professionals. In your opinion, what separates the two? I
would say this is actually true with almost any sales or entrepreneurship and professions, but it's lead generation.
Okay.
Business development prospecting. Because if you, as a professional, have a bounty of leads and business coming in, or ideas, if you're an entrepreneur type of person, then you are going to have more opportunities. You have the ability to cherry pick. You can, top grade. You can refer out. You can be much more selective. It's when that area is lacking, then again, you're out of the abundance perspective. You're in that lack perspective. It tends to hit this, instead of being on a virtuous cycle, you're on a vicious cycle, and you're trying to scramble to get business. And that's where, so if anybody wants to start, and that's the first component of the real estate success in 5 minutes a day, and also why commit to get leads 66-day challenge, is but I created it because I found that when it solves a lot of things, it really does. When you have more business and you know what to do with, I mean, you still need to do the other things, and you still have to connect. You still have to consult to sell. You still have to take that lead and prospect and get it through the transaction, or have money coming on the end. And you still have to do what I call connect, build, and grow. You still have to do the things to get off the hamster wheel of only as good as your next deal or transaction. And you still need to do success thinking, activities, and vision, which is mindset and motivation. But until you have a lead, you have nothing to do. Yeah. So you don't have any business to be building on until you have business, you actually have business coming in.
And what a lot of sales professionals struggle with is they'll go out and get the leads, then they'll get the lead flow, then they'll actually go to the execution or the sales process and the closing process, and the lead flow starts to dwindle. Then they run back to the leads, and they get that going again. They run back. How do you keep the whole system flowing? So while you're over here on the closing side, the lead side is continuing.
Yeah, that is like the ultimate dilemma that I see over and over again. I call it the roller coaster. And many people talk about the roller coaster of sales of that. People get a lead and they work real hard on it, and then they stop lead generating. So the key is to not stop lead generating. And the way I explain this to people is it's like when you go to a theme park and it's Memorial Day and summer's starting, so we'll kick off the season, and you see that when they're busy, they're constantly at the roller coaster, they're constantly setting off a car, right? They don't wait for the car to get all the way through before they start another car. So the idea is to just fill up the next car and start it, and fill up the next car and start it, and that's where activity blocking can be so impactful, because for myself, like I said, I don't care how busy I am. It's 5 a day. I do 5 a day, and we're having our busiest year ever. I mean, we've already sold $55 million worth of real estate this year. And I could say, wow, I could let up on the,
never
let
let
up. I don't really need to shoot off any more cars again. But the thing is, as soon as you stop doing that, I have this thought that a lot of people talk about the law of attraction, and what I found, what the law of attraction, how it works for me is by the act of me doing the lead generation, prospecting, business development, I'm sending out to the universe, I'm ready, willing, and able to have business come to me. It's not matchy-matchy. And this is where I think some people get hung up. Well, I called that person and they didn't call me back. And I'm like, yeah, and they might not. But you see, the thing is you, as a salesperson, are sending out the message that you're ready. And by doing that, something else will happen in some way. And that's where, when you talk about being addicted to positive things, that's where I'm like, it's a little almost like gambling. You don't know which lever you're going to pull that's going to make all the money come. And so those of us that have seen the positive sides of these addictions, the thing is you have to keep pulling the lever. Yeah. And it's when you stop, that's when the flow stops. So the stop and starting is almost the worst thing you can do.
Yeah. I always love that SW. Some will, some won't.
Yes.
Some will, some won't.
Some won't.
So what? Someone's waiting. And I always like replacing the so what with so why.
Who else?
Yeah, why? Is there a reason? Is there something that you need to transition or pivot in your marketing? Learn from the process and start to understand, ask questions of why you may not be resonating and why those averages aren't going up. And of course, track everything. When I had my salon business, I remember we had it down to a science. I knew for every 14 salons that I went to see, I would eventually close that salon. And it was mathematics. So the more I saw, as soon as I got to the 14th, now that wasn't like the 14th one ended up by, but stretch it over a period of a year. And I knew if I went out to 140 that I'd get 10.
You'd get 10. And that's why I know when I do the 5 a day, what generally my business is going to turn into. And the beautiful thing is if you've done it for 17 years, you just have such an amazing cumulative effect. But people have asked me if I ever have stopped, and I did. I stopped for 3 months when I was writing my book, thinking after, 14 years of business, 15 years of business, sure, I could take a little sabbatical, 3 months. And it happened to be at a time in the market when all of the lending legislation was changing because of Dodd-Frank. And so I was like, okay, nobody's going to be doing loans anyhow. Nobody's going to be buying houses. And that was true, except that by me stopping, it meant like everything stopped. And I woke up in January 2016 and I had nothing on the books. And that was like, oh my gosh, I have a full team here and people to pay. And so you know what I did to fill the pipeline? I double timed. So I double timed for 3 months and matched everything I would have done during that 3 months. And got it back flowing again and had best year ever. So when people are like, okay, what do I do now if, things have stopped? I'm like, well, then just double time for 3 months. I mean, there's a solution, right? You could have gone to see, 10 more salons a week or whatever. I mean, that's the beauty of tracking, is that you will know what will turn into business. And you're right, you get better. You should get better. You should get smarter. And you'll learn so much by doing. What you won't learn is by not doing, is you won't have all that benefit.
Yeah, and keep tracking what's working, what's not working, because as you spend years doing it, you start to get a really good sense of who that ideal client is.
Oh,
At
absolutely.
this point, I mean, you see him walk in the door, you know the background, what's going on, and you're like, that's my guy, that's my
Yep.
girl. You know? And when they're coming in at such force, or so many, it's so much easier when you know exactly who your team is, who your community is, who you need to spend your time on. And the ones that aren't, you know, it's just, I could help you, but you're probably not the best fit for us. They are.
Well, and that's where you have, again, back to so many choices. You can build a team. If you're in real estate, you build a team. You can refer it out. You can get more staff. There's so many things that you can do when you have all those choices. But when you don't have anybody coming to the door, you're scrambling. Again, you're in a position of lack.
Yeah, it's funny because our ideal client earns $500,000 or more personally a year from their business. And a friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this startup. Can you help me?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, you're not going to be a client. I have the tools to help you, but I'll do it as a favor. I'll do a little bit of work for you." And like halfway through, I'm like, "This is why I don't work with startups."
Right.
It's like I was trying to do a favor for him, and I'm like, "This is a pain. I mean, I hate to be in this lane. It's horrible."
And I have the similar business that's the same way. And the benefit of being at this point in time, I now have choices. And that's why I feel it's very empowering. It really is, because that's where I want to share with your community out there. If I could do it, you can too. I think that people think that it's hard. And I'm like, no, actually, again, putting into these habits in place are actually very easy, because you don't have to think about it. I know what I'm doing every day. I'm going to get up and lead generate.
Let's talk about that just for a second, because I know you have some great online courses for the real estate professional. Who is that ideal client for you for some of the course stuff that you're doing?
Absolutely. It's in the beginning, it was my sphere of influence, and it's still my sphere of influence. And the people that already know, like, and trust me is who I farm, if you will. And I use I'm sure you've heard these sales statistics of, you talk to 100 people that are random or cold or whatever, and 10 will actually have some sort of communication with you. 3 will move forward with you, and 1 will close, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, you can 10 times this thing immediately by just talking to 10 people who already talked to you. Right. Are you talking to 90 people who won't talk to you? I'm like, what a waste of energy. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I could be doing a lot of other things other than getting rejected that much. And not that I don't understand that there's numbers, it's a numbers game for all of it, but you as a sales professional, again, 10 times your business just by starting with people who will talk to you. Now, they won't necessarily do business with you, but because they already know, like, and trust you, you're already ahead of the game. So that is, in terms of strategy, that's like the number one strategy. I think it seems so obvious, but for some reason, people think it's easier to sell to people they don't know. And I'm like, really? What makes you think that?
You might be talking to some people that don't know who you are. They're a real estate professional. Is it the newbie? Is it someone who's been in the business for a couple of years and is kind of struggling to get to that next level? Is it the professional that's looking to just take their game to the next level? Who's that kind of ideal client if they're listening today?
You mean in terms of helping
online courses
for coaching? Oh, yes. Actually, it works for both, because I find that the new person, it's just got the basic fundamentals, right? And for the professional who's been in the business for a little while, it will help you up level your game, help you take it to the next level. A lot of it you're going to maybe already know, but at the same time, because it's the fundamentals, it'll give you that core strength. And on the idea of the sphere, the other reason why to talk with your sphere or work with your sphere or some sort of connection, I'm sure you've heard of the 7 degrees of separation. studies have shown, a lot of statistics have shown that it's the strength of the weak ties that leads to the most business being done. I think a lot of people think, oh, I've got to go to my friends and my relatives. And I'm like, yeah, you can let them know you do real estate or sales of whatever it is you're doing. Their contacts to the next levels, again, the 7 levels, those weak ties are going to be where the majority of my business, but it is where the majority of my businesses come from, and I've tracked it long enough. I would say this is pretty true for a lot of people. So that is helpful to know, because I think that holds people back when they're like, yeah, but my friends and relatives aren't going to work with me. And I'm like, okay, well then, who do they know?
Right. So the weak ties are friends of friends, or friends?
Yes.
Kind of know. Okay. Friends of friends.
Yeah. So that's why LinkedIn is so powerful. I mean, really the reason why LinkedIn has achieved what it's achieved is those 2nd and 3rd degree connections, right? So, because if you already knew the person, you would talk to them.
Yeah. And it's so powerful. When someone knows you, refers you, I mean, it's just such a powerful tool. We get phone calls every week.
See, you do the same thing, right?
You get the phone call and it's like, hi, this is Bob. Fred told me to call you. He said to hire you. I don't know what you do, how you do it, or how much it costs, but I'm in. Because I forget which one I use, Bob or Fred. The client basically said, hey, you got to use this person. Same thing in real estate. It's like, hey, you need a house? Call her. Call Karen. She's your girl.
And I think that it's probably true with most everything. I mean, I think about all the service providers I use. I start with people who I know and say, and that's why even like Yelp and all of these systems are based on this third-party endorsement. But the highest level endorsement is going to be somebody who you have some relationship with. And that's the other thing I would say is expand what you consider or define as a sphere of influence. I call it anybody who will recognize my name. And so I have the benefit of having a lot of name recognition because my sign's all over the place. But it wasn't always that way. I mean, I didn't start out with everybody knowing who I was. But then over time, I recognized the fact, again, that it was such a serendipitous way that I would get a client. And I'd like, wow, this is amazing. So the more energy I put into it, then the more, it's like anything, what you focus on expands. So by focusing on that type of business, then that is what expanded. Now, there are other people that do what they call geographic farming, and that can have its benefits as well, or certain segment of the market farming, and that can certainly have an impact. But if you're new or you're wanting to jumpstart your business, this is where I find people make the most impact.
Yeah, and look, if you don't have your sign everywhere, introduce yourself to everybody. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm constantly just saying, hi, Thor Conklin. Now, I have a unique name, so people tend to remember it. I'm not pitching them, but I'm just just saying hello to another human being. I live in a high-rise, and the other day I realized I'm riding up and down in the elevator every single day, and I don't know anybody that lives in the building. I'm like, why am I doing that? Now, they're not going to be clients, obviously, or maybe some would, but it's just
you don't know that.
Right. You don't know exactly. It's just continuing to get your name out there, continuing to get your name out. And now I go places and it's like, Thor Conklin, I know you. It's like, where do I know you from? It's like, oh yeah, I met you like at Starbucks. You said hello and shook my hand or something. Just get out there. Just, press the flesh. Hi.
Well, and I would suggest is having a unique question. So like for myself, instead of asking people what they do, I ask them where they live. So I'm in real estate, right? So it automatically gets me to able to have a real estate conversation with someone before I have to say, the annoying thing, well, I'm a real estate agent. Yeah. They almost always want to know about real estate, but I've met people on airplanes and sold them real estate. It's amazing. Everybody wants to talk about real estate. So the idea of an interesting question will make also the conversation more interesting, right, for them and for yourself. But if you could think of a way for whatever it is that you do, and that you could ask them something about themselves other than, the standard questions.
I like that. Thor Conklin, split level or traditional?
Ah, there you go. So are you a high-rise type or are you a
high-rise? Yeah.
Are you a high rise on the beach, or are you a high rise with a city view?
That's right.
Yeah.
That'll definitely start a conversation. I want to end with this. You and I have been around, fortunately, for a few years. We've seen a lot in the real estate market over this period. I remember when interest rates were 16 and 17%.
Yes, I started in the business then.
Yes, and there's a lot of new professionals that have got in, the last 5 years, 6 years. It's been a great market. It's been a great run, but there are other times in the market as well. We've seen a lot. What's some of your advice as far as what could come in the future, what to be prepared for? I find I've got a lot of friends and clients actually in the real estate space, more on the development side. And, it's been a good run. And one of the things that we're talking about now is, risk management and making sure that they don't run into a wall. What's some of the advice that you're telling your agents and those around you?
Those that have crystal balls. So I like Wayne Gretzky's quote, to go where the puck is going. So that is I started out in the business as a real estate developer. And so knowing where the trends are going, where the market is going, of course, the idea is it's in the future, so no one really knows for sure. But if you're like in hockey, you can see a trajectory and you can see where it's going, right? So one of the most important things to watch and track is supply and demand, because it's like gravity. And people have this sometimes philosophy, well, if they build it, they will come, or if we, whatever, and the market will come to it. That isn't necessarily the case. I'm sure you've seen that, right? Where they had this grand vision and the market didn't take it, or maybe they were too far ahead of their time, and it's the next generation that's going to be doing that. So in terms of myself in tracking, I track supply and demand numbers on a quarterly basis, and I watch for trends. And the other thing I would say that's really important to be tracking is demographic shifts. So the baby boomer generation was the largest generation, and they're at about an 80 million population. The generation after them are about 10 million less of them. So whatever it is that the baby boomers did, there's 10 million less people to take those places, right? So if you're in real estate and you're in a community or a market, and it could be retail, it could be residential, it really could be any product. You could say this for any product, actually, if you think about it. So there's 10 million less buyers. Now, what may make up the difference in that population may be the international buyers. That's not had as much of an impact the last few years as what sometimes it does. The millennials are going to then take over the world because there's 90 million of them. So if you're looking into really far in the future, look to where the millennials are going. But be aware that there could be a dip in between. Because if you just look at things like school populations and college populations and housing and other types of things, the markets that are depending on the income level and the stage of life level of the Generation X, they're going to see a dip because there's just 10 million less of them, right? They were 10 million less of them, they're going to have 10 million less children, right? So that next generation. So I would say watch for that dip in those submarkets. And the best way to predict where it's going is to do the supply and demand and see where the trends are, being mindful of these demographic shifts.
Love it. Look at the numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a math major at heart, but at the same time, they don't lie. And this is where I see people get themselves in trouble, is they want to believe it's going to do something. And so they think that's enough, right?
Yeah, it's, you got to, like you said, the numbers don't lie. And we talk all the time, track, measure, adjust. If you're not tracking, you can't measure. If you're not measuring, you can't make the adjustments. And wanting something, wishing something, there's a big difference in wanting and committing. So Karen, thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. This has been a great conversation with peak performers. I enjoyed sharing all of these ideas with you.
Well, thank you. And in the show notes, you can find all the information about Karen, how to reach her, the programs that she has available. Please reach out to her. And Karen, thank you once again for coming on. Have an incredible Memorial Day. And it reminded me, I had in my show notes here, so often I see entrepreneurs, they all want to rally around that 4-hour work week nirvana that Tim Ferriss talks about. And I got a good mentor of mine that says the 4-hour work week is a great concept as long as your competitors are working 3 hours a week.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah. So we're putting in the time to grow our businesses and our brand. Have an amazing day. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.